Nazywam się Jarosław Dumanowski, jestem historykiem. Dzięki temu, że odwiedził nas w Polsce słynny specjalista od historii i kultury jedzenia, profesor Fabio Parasecoli z Nowego Jorku, chcieliśmy opowiedzieć, pokazać coś o robieniu czegoś ważnego, czegoś popularnego, klasycznego z kuchni włoskiej. Tym razem risotto. Będzie nam pomagał jeden z najwspanialszych polskich kucharzy, prezes klubu szefów kuchni i razem przyrządzą risotto. Ale nie chodzi o samo jedzenie, o samo risotto, chociaż to bardzo ważne, jak się robi prawdziwe risotto, jak Włoch robi risotto. Ważna jest pewna opowieść, skąd ryż we Włoszech i jak to jest, że takie produkty stają się symbolem kraju znanym na całym świecie.
Ciao, I am Fabio Parasecoli. I am Italian, but I live in New York, where I teach food studies. I'm gonna make another very famous, very quintessential Italian recipe, and that is risotto. So we start very simply. We can take half an onion and cut it quite thinly. And we might want to try to make it in smaller pieces so it cooks better, very simply. So we start with the onion and the butter. Risotto rice is one of those recipes that traditionally is made in butter. In Italy, not everywhere people had access to olive oil. Some places it was very expensive. So in other areas where cows were more common, it totally made more sense to use butter. So we can start with a little butter in our pan. So we have our butter melt a little bit in our pot. It gives it a nice silky texture. Risotto is all about the textures, as we will see. And for that reason, we use specifically varieties of risotto. This that we're going to use is Carnaroli. Now, these varieties are relatively recent. There were new development after World War II. Our butter is almost melted. We can add our onions in it. And we start making sure that all the onions are well covered in butter, and they slowly cook until they become transparent. You want to make sure that the flame is not too high, otherwise the onions burn, and that gives a very bad taste to your risotto. So when you see that they are soft and transparent, then you add the risotto. Here we're using half a kilo of Carnaroli rice. You mix and you make sure that it toasts nicely. One of the tricks to risotto is that it needs to be a little toasted before you start cooking it. So to make this toast, you have to make sure that you don't have too much butter, otherwise it becomes too liquid, and this needs to have a quite dry feel to it. Make sure when you cook to also cook with your ears, because the sounds of your pot and of your food tells you a lot of things. Now I can already hear that the temperature is going up and the rice is starting to toast. So why did I choose risotto? Risotto is also one of those recipes that has been added to the Italian culinary canon relatively late. The first recipe of risotto as we know it today is found in a cookbook of 1853 by an author that lived in the area of Milan. And as we will discover, it's not by chance that the story of risotto is really connected with the north of Italy and in particularly with Milan. Make sure that nothing burns. So now we have a little dry white wine and we add it to our risotto. Can you hear it? The temperature was high enough that the wine will evaporate pretty quickly. Let's give it a second. We have to make sure that the wine evaporates before we start adding the stock. On the side, we've made a very nice chicken stock with all the ingredients. We added a turnip, some leek, celery, we added carrots. So we make sure that the stock is nice and tasty. So here you already can see that this particular variety of wines leaves some content around, some amide, and that's what gives the specific creamy texture to risotto that we like so much. At this point, we start adding stock bit by bit. We mix it in, and we make sure that the rice is well covered, and we leave it cook. In the meantime, we'll start preparing our mushrooms. I'm going to make risotto with mushrooms, which is a very traditional combination that we find in many parts of northern Italy. Look how beautiful these mushrooms are. These are really gorgeous. And we're going to simply slice them in any way you want them. So, what's the story of rice in Italy? Rice was probably introduced for the first time with the Arabs. The Arabs conquered Sicily in southern Italy, the island of Sicily, in the 10th century. And they brought with them lots of products that were not present in Italy. One of them was rice. Apparently, they also tried to introduce the production of rice in Sicily, but it didn't last much. Although the Arabs introduced lots of technology for irrigation, so they brought water in many places, and as you know, rice needs a lot of water. The Arabs also occupied Spain, and that's where they also introduced rice and the cultivation of rice. So in the Middle Ages, rice became known in Italy, but mostly it was known as a spice. It was so expensive, so precious, that people couldn't just eat it like this. So it was used to make medicines, or was used in the courts among the elites for many kinds of dishes. It will be until the 15th century before that we start having traces of rice cultivation in Italy. It seems that the beginning was in the south, again, in the area south of Naples that was occupied by the King of Aragon. Aragon was one of the kingdom of Spain. So in a way, the Spaniards brought the rice with them. And from the south, it started going north. So we have traces in the 15th century of cultivation of rice around Florence. And then finally, we have it in the north. So here, we're almost run out of stock. We had to add some more. We keep on mixing. As I said, let's make sure that this never sticks to the bottom of the pan. So the first major cultivation of rice in Italy was in the area around Milan under the Sforza. The Sforza name might be better known in Poland because of Bona Sforza, a princess that in the 16th century was married to a Polish prince and future king. The family was originally from Milan, and the family started cultivating rice in that area. And later on, when the Spaniards would occupy northern Italy, the area around Milan, they will also increase their cultivation of rice. And so we have rice pads expanding both towards the west, so in the area of Vercelli, and towards the east, toward Veneto. So at this point, there was more rice available, but still not many recipes. One of the first recipes we find is in a book by Maestro Martino, a chef of the 15th century. It's a very important book because it's one of the first books that really shows Italian recipes written in a way that explain techniques, ingredients, and all that. The recipes of Maestro Martino became so popular that a few decades later, a very important intellectual called Platina took them and translated into Latin and made them part of a larger book where he discusses food from the philosophical point of view, from the health point of view, from the cultural point of view. Through the Latin translation of Platina, these recipes are basically spread all over Europe, and there will be several translations of the Platina's book in foreign languages. So what's the recipe in Mastro Martino? It's very simple. You prepare a stock, you cook the rice in it. When the rice is cooked, you take it out, and then you mix a few egg yolks in some of the rice. You make it nice and well mixed, and then you put it back together with the rest to give it the silky texture that we'll find later on in risotto. But this is definitely not a risotto recipe yet. We can call it maybe the grandfather of a risotto, but not really a risotto. So here we see that the rice has already absorbed its stock, and we keep on adding a couple of ladles, and we let it cook. So while our risotto keeps on cooking, we keep on adding stock as the rice absorbs it. We can start with our mushroom. Very simply, we can put a few pieces of garlic in the pan, a little bit of olive oil. So we have our garlic browning in the olive oil. You make sure it doesn't burn. You add your mushrooms. And we saute them real quick, because then they will be also cooked at the end with the risotto. So you have to make sure you don't overcook your mushrooms. As usual, you add a little salt, a little pepper, and you let them cook a little bit until they start becoming soft. So we keep an eye on our rice. You can see it's almost absorbed its stock. Take some more. You keep on adding until the rice is cooked. You have to be careful not to overcook the rice though. Good risotto is never overcooked. It's never too soft. At this point, we can also add a little salt to the rice and a little pepper so it mixes well. Our mushrooms are also cooking. Very soon we'll have to remember to take our garlic out. We don't want garlic in the risotto. So I was telling you the story of rice. So in the 16th, 17th, 18th century, we have the cultivation of rice that expands in many areas of northern Italy. But at this time, risotto still doesn't exist as a recipe. The normal way of cooking rice was to put it in a pan and more or less know how much quantity of rice it would need, put it on the stove, and wait until the rice absorbed all the liquid and it's ready. So basically, very often it had a soupy texture. And in Italy, we have lots of rice-based soups. For instance, in Veneto, a very famous dish is riso and bisi, which means rice and green peas, which is sort of a soupy rice-based dish. Really, really good, but definitely not a risotto. So we don't know exactly at what point risotto developed as a dish, but as I said before, the first recipe we had of risotto as we know it today is from 1853. At that point, rice was growing in many parts of Italy. It totally made sense that Italians found ways to create dishes with it. So during fascism, the government decided to increase the quantity of rice that was grown and above all consumed in Italy. Let's remember that rice was normally grown and consumed in northern Italy. In the center of and the south, not so much. So in the 30s, the fascist government created a national organization to promote the consumption of rice. So while this organization pushed through advertisements and propaganda so that Italians all over the country ate more rice, at the same time, it also worked with scientists to create new varieties. And this work continued also right after the war, and that's when many varieties like the Carnaroli we're using today were developed. So here our mushrooms are ready. You can see most of the water has disappeared. At this point, we make sure that we take our garlic out. So now our rice is almost ready. It has absorbed quite a bit of broth. You can see also it has grown in quantity and it has the right texture. You add a little more butter and you keep on stirring. Of course, the rice keeps on cooking, but it's on a much milder heat. This process in Italian is called mantecare. So we're doing this. At this point, we're also ready to add some Parmesan cheese on it. And you keep on doing this, keep on mixing, mantecare in Italian. It smells good, which is a good sign. See, this is the texture you want to reach. The rice has to be al dente, so it's still a little crunchy, cooked but crunchy. The sort of creamy texture is given by the amide, the butter, and the cheese. Is not overcooked rice. So at this point, we have our mushrooms. We can put most of the mushrooms in it. We'll keep some just for decoration to put on top of our dish. And we keep on mixing. Personally, I prefer putting the mushroom at the end when they're already cooked on the side, so they don't let water added to the risotto, and the risotto doesn't lose its texture. So at this point, we can take a nice dish and serve our risotto ai funghi, risotto with mushrooms. There you go. You may want to add a couple of mushrooms on top for decoration, and then maybe, if you want, another little bit of Parmesan cheese. You've got your recipe right here. The touch of the chef.
Perfekto.
The mushrooms are really good.
Polish mushrooms.
Polish
I must.
mushrooms.
Jak? Bardzo dobrze. Nikt nie zostanie dla filmowców. Cały garnek zjemy.
Cały garnek.
Zjemy.
No tak, Fabio nam dzisiaj przygotował klasykę z kuchni włoskiej. Klasyka to jest podstawa, żeby zbudować później coś jeszcze więcej i od tego powinniśmy zacząć. Także polecam wszystkim młodym uczniom i młodym ludziom, którzy zaczynają gotować, nauczyć się pierw klasyki własnej, klasyki obcych krajów i tak naprawdę już później improwizacja i zabawa.